For Alphonse, the difference is that English was his primary language, and he used French only for personal and family reasons. Alphonse's diary when he was away at school was entirely in English. He attended the University of North Carolina. His books from there are all in English. He was one of a number of cousins of about the same age who grew up in the vicinity of Natchitoches in the 40s and 50s, 1840s and 50s. From what I can tell, they all knew French, some very well, as shown by notebooks and that they kept in composition. However, they corresponded with each other. These cousins corresponded with each other in English, and they kept their diaries in English. There are about 30 letters between two of these particular young cousins when they were teenagers. Connie had just finished school in New York and was back home, and she was absolutely bored to death. She didn't know what to do with herself, and so she and Coralie were corresponding with each other. And they were talking about exactly the sorts of things that young women would be talking about. And I have some, I'll just read one short. Oh, funny, I was about to forget mentioning to you that blunt Raziel's arrivals. I was coming from Mass Thursday morning. I saw him on a large gray horse riding from Gondocourt. And so there are all sorts of teenagery sorts of things of that in there, all in English, every once in a while going into just a little French phrase. A dramatic choice of English over French occurred after the Civil War in 1868 when Alphonse, that second generation, arranged to have himself called and be named the administrator of his father's estate. And this Ben Toledano had been his father's factor for years and years and kept writing to Alphonse in French. And Alphonse just decided, he just wrote him back in English, and he just made it very plain, I'm taking this business over myself. And it seemed to me that it was a very sort of a bold statement for him to stop writing in French to this man who wrote to him with the two form and called him Français and mon cher Al, and that sort of thing. Okay, well, I'm skipping here quickly to the end. By the 1860s, even the language between family members for personal communication was English among these in this second generation. And I have a couple of examples here. One of Benjamin sending to Octave, his sister, a note, I enclose the receipts from the funeral of your child amounting to $75. Well, I mean, if you're not going to be intimate about writing to your sister about that, what would you be writing intimate about? And this is completely in English with no French in it whatsoever. In business correspondence, the latest letter in French that I found so far is dated 1873, and it happens to be from a local farmer, not from a businessman. Both the first and second generations of the Prudhommes after the Louisiana Purchase were bilingual, and they gave no evidence whatsoever of them perfectly learning either French or English. Their French was good, their English was good, as well as I can tell. And there are very few code switches, very few throughout the corpus of, going from one to the other. So, in summary, jumping to the end, for this one tight-knit Creole family living in an area in which the Anglo-tone population increased dramatically during the first half of the 1800s, the pattern of retaining or relinquishing the ancestral language is a familiar. The first generation stuck to French as much as possible, using English for economic reasons. Their children stuck to English as much as possible, using French mainly for reasons of communication and solidarity. By the time of the Civil War, then, except for these church notices, pretty much, French had disappeared as the public language in the Natchitoches area.
We've got time for one or two questions.
Yeah, but thank you. That was very interesting. I'm eager to hear your paper for obvious reasons because it connects to some of the I'm doing this. I've been struck too by the same thing about the lack of learner errors, you might say, or any detected errors in French and English in the correspondence that I saw in Natchitoches, in French and English. And I'm wondering if it doesn't go back at its origin perhaps to this diglossia origin. You had people being weaned away from Creole by being sent, to a concept from Italy where referential French became French, and it kind of led to that plus Creole pride led to a really high degree of language loyalty that maybe reflected the kinds of things you're saying, the lack of code switching. And all the correspondence that I looked at in Natchitoches, there was only one English word that frequently appeared as a borrowing in any of their letters, and that was steamboat. And that was it. And
I found backstretch when they were talking about racehorses. Yeah. I was just amazed at, now, my French is not that good. I mean, there might be errors that I'm not seeing, but it looks like the kind of school French that I learned. I mean, I can read it that way, and it looks like they're, that just is subjunctive and all of this sort of thing. And their English is very, very good. And even that first generation Prudhomme is a really, really interesting person. It's like Japan, you get into these people's lives here.
I was a mess with this. I did have one comment about that, but no one else has a question. But it makes you wonder, though, there's a divergence, though, between the written code and the oral code, right? Because if you compare that kind of writing to what the kind of literary dialect that you see in the works of George Washington Cable, for example, in Creole, Orleans. I mean, that may explain why they reacted so violently against him. Because they felt that he was creating a character that they were very, very trying to take away the country ways. But there's that great experience between the two.
And I did find it interesting, though, that these teenage girls, they were just, this was sort of trendy for them. I mean, it was part of their, that they were writing in English and everything. And it gets me to thinking about how much, how much is language change, in fact, in the hands of the teenagers.
Thanks, Connie.
I did not. But I've only been through about 15 boxes. Not a single thing.